Welcome to Zero Knowledge. I'm your host, Anna Rose. In this podcast, we will be exploring the latest in zero-knowledge research and the decentralized web, as well as new paradigms that promise to change the way we interact and transact online. This week, I catch up with Zaki from Sommelier and Dean from Agoric. We catch up about their respective projects and then explore some major narratives happening in the Cosmos ecosystem. Specifically, we recap the UST collapse, fallout, and impact on Cosmos. We talk about the move of some apps from roll-ups to their own app chain, as well as projects looking to be increasingly exposed to IBC or bridging into the Cosmos ecosystem. Finally, we look at IST, or Interstable Token, a project being developed by the Agoric team, which is meant to be a Cosmos-native, multi-collateral stablecoin. We look at how they are thinking about it, how other projects' successes and failures are influencing its design, as well as the role it hopes to play in the ecosystem. Now, before we kick off, I do want to highlight a new video series that we are launching this summer called the ZK Whiteboard Sessions. It's produced by ZK Hack, as well as the ZK crew from Polygon. In it, hosts Bobbin and Brendan interview top experts in the ZK space, exploring the most important concepts and building blocks of ZK. I'm going to add the link to this in the show notes, and it's definitely a great resource to watch out for. We're just starting to release these whiteboard series now, so you might want to check it out. We also have 3 introductory videos for the ZK Whiteboard series produced by Dan Bonet from Stanford. So you can already check out a lot of these videos over at ZK Hack. One more thing, this September, the ZK Summit returns for its 8th edition, and we are bringing it back to Berlin. It's happening during the Berlin Blockchain Week. Be sure to apply to attend. Spots are limited, so get your application in soon. Now, Tanya is going to let you know a little bit about this week's sponsor.
Today's episode is sponsored by Aleo. Aleo is a new Layer 1 blockchain that achieves the programmability of Ethereum, the privacy of Zcash, and the scalability of a rollup. If you're interested in building private applications, then check out Aleo's programming language called Leo. Leo enables non-cryptographers to harness the power of ZKPs to deploy decentralized exchanges, hidden information games, regulated stablecoins, and more. Visit leo-lang.org to start building. You can also participate in Aleo's incentivized testnet 3 by downloading and running a Snark OS node. No signup is necessary to participate. For questions, join their Discord at aleo.org/discord. So thank you again, Aleo. Now here is Anna's episode with Dean and Zaki.
Today, I'm here with Dean from Agoric and Zaki from Sommelier. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be here.
I'm very excited to catch up with both of you. One of the reasons that we're doing this episode is to talk a little bit about general kind of Cosmos narratives. I wanted to talk to people about the UST fallout from a few months ago, and I felt like the two of you would be fantastic people to talk about this with. And also, we want to touch on sort of a new plan for something called IST. But before we do that, I mean, you're both from different projects. You've both been on the show before, but it's been a few months, and I think we're kind of due for a little check-in on what each of you are doing. So let's start with Zaki. You were actually on the show last October.
Yep.
You presented Sommelier. I can definitely link to that in the show notes, but you did just tell me before we started recording that a lot has changed. So do tell me what has changed.
So probably the last time we spoke, Sommelier was focused on Uniswap v3 liquidity management. That was kind of our game. What we learned over the course of a few months was that basically any sort of decentralized liquidity management on V3 style dexes is going to lose money.
Oh, no.
Outside of a relatively narrow set of use cases around stablecoins and paired assets, some of the stuff that Arrakis and Gelato are doing, it's a relatively narrow set of things. If you are making money on Uniswap v3, you are hedging on centralized venues. You are doing there was $200 million of flash liquidity on Uniswap v3 in the last year. We basically analyzed the whole Uniswap v3 space and came back in December and were oh, we are not going to launch this product. 'Cause I'm not going to launch this product. I'm not going to launch a product that I am 100% sure people will lose money on.
Oh, man.
So in the meantime, we had actually been like specking out like a different set of use cases for Sommelier, and we have sort of entirely pivoted to this.
Okay.
And the new use cases are actually probably going to be launched like within a week of when this episode goes live. We're looking at like July 20th as our most likely launch date. Everything is done. Chain is upgraded. Smart contracts are audited. Like UI is done. It's like really great. So what we decided we really wanted to focus on is this like combination off-chain computation model or off-chain strategy model with validator-driven on-chain execution. So like you have some entity, who knows what it is? It could be a program, could be a bot, could be a guy on a keyboard. You have no, like the system does not define what this is. Is sending messages to the validators telling them what trades need to be executed on various smart contracts that we call sellers. And then those contracts are executed. So we are initially launching with the Aave stablecoin rebalancing seller, which is just going to go and say, hey, I would like to know which stablecoin I can get the best yield on Aave and just like rebalance my funds into it. I don't want to take like spot risk, essentially, like risk on the appreciation of the asset. Like here's a list of stablecoins, because there's actually quite a bit of volatility between different stablecoins in the lending market. And like rebalancing this yourself is like a full-time job. So this is the first thing that we're launching. But really what's very cool about Sommelier now is that we are a platform, i.e. you can launch pretty much any seller you want. We have already started onboarding like external teams who are building sellers on our platform. Really, the only thing that is like slowing us down at this point is everybody's like, this sounds really cool. I just want to see money moving through the system. I'm like, I feel the same way. And that's why we're starting out with this like very low risk stablecoin seller that it's like, will this make insane amounts of money for any, especially right now, it won't. Yields will eventually go up. Like they will. But like right now, obviously, like stablecoin lending yield, like demand is terrible. But there are actually strategies that we see coming that are really good for like kind of a bear market environment. Like this is a great time to be like, hey, like buy ST-ETH if the ST-ETH discount goes outside of a range. Buy ETH when it is like, you know, when it has moved out of like the 2-week moving average, right? On the bottom side. Like there are strategies that are going to do, that are potentially like huge money making strategies, but are like, you need to be a like full-time trader to really run yourselves. Strategists can provide these strategies on top of Sommelier and get this like sort of high reliability execution environment. And we have a fully generic platform that can support sort of arbitrary smart contracts and arbitrary strategies today. So yeah, this is what Sommelier is now, is like we are sort of an arbitrary strategy execution platform.
I mean, you did have that strategy mentality before. I just want to check something though. Are you primarily still looking to kind of work from the Cosmos area, but working over a bridge with Ethereum? Because like if you're doing Aave, you're talking about like the ETH Aave.
Yeah. The primary place that we're executing right now is Ethereum. Okay. We have multi-EVM support coming, but like it's going to be interesting to see how compelling that is in the bear market too. All of the liquidity has retreated to its home on Ethereum. But like the general framework that we've built is applicable to Cosmos. It's applicable to Ethereum. It's potentially applicable to other chains. We're mostly looking for like where economic opportunities arise, because like the whole point of this thing is to be able to like aggregate significant amounts of capital underneath it.
When you say the word seller, I think we're continuing with the wine metaphor. Am I right? So
yes.
It's a C. It's not a seller like an S.
Yeah, it's a CELLAR, seller.
Okay. And these sellers are strategies. There are contracts that execute strategies. Or?
They're vaults. They're like comparable to like urine vaults or enzyme vaults, right? But the difference is they have this sort of unique thing, right? Where you have off-chain strategies. So, you know, you have this off-chain strategist. The off-chain strategist can sort of make discretionary orders, right? The strategy is not fully on-chain. But you also have this validator set that can potentially swap out the strategist. And so we have this like sort of interesting governance dynamic between the strategists, the validators, the SOM holders. Like one of the other things that is just like we're really pushing for is to do a Cosmos chain where the rewards are not inflationary.
Oh.
So basically, SOM holders and SOM validators do not make money until users make that money. Okay. And so that has been another big piece of the experiment.
But you already have a chain.
Yeah. Our chain has been launched for a while.
Yeah.
We've even done the seller upgraded, 2 months ago. We have been in a Solidity smart contract audit hell process for a while. And that concluded on Friday. And so now we're rearing to go.
Very nice. All right, let's switch over to you, Dean. We actually had a conversation about Agoric more recently, I believe, this past year, February, actually 2022, where you introduced Agoric. We talked about Harden.js. I'm also going to link to that in the show notes if people want to find out more. But you have since launched, I think, right? Or had you launched then? I think you had not launched then. So tell me what's gone on your side.
Okay, so Agoric is a big platform play that's really important to getting mainstream developers into being able to do smart contracts by enabling smart contracts in hardened JavaScript, as you mentioned. But there are multiple stages to that launch. So last November, we launched the layer 0, the Cosmos layer, what we call mainnet 0, which allowed the deployment of BLD tokens. It allowed us to do a public sale at the end of December and so forth. But that was, phase 0 of several. Phase 1 is the important next step where we launch the hardened JavaScript platform. And once that's launched, then smart contracts will launch on top of that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll talk about interprotocol in a little bit. But that's mainnet 1. Now, we're sort of steadily marching towards that with testnets, with a preview release of the bunch of smart contracts on the platform on top of it. So a preview release of the interprotocol. For other projects, we've got lots of security audits, third-party security audits in progress. And we have a economic stress test where economists are testing, the economics of and analyzing the economics of the stable token infrastructure, the AMMs, and the other smart contracts that are critical to the mainnet 1. Right now, our strategy was always, launch a set of contracts that provide a stable economy. Right, the platform is, build fast, earn fast, rapid development using a modern component architecture of interesting smart contracts, and being able to deploy them in a stable, vibrant economy, which to our mind includes having basic trading and having a stable token to grease the wheels of commerce in that economy. And so all of that launches, those first round of contracts launch in mainnet 1, targeted later this year, targeted Q3.
Cool.
After that is the next couple of stages are permissioned release, governance determined release of new smart contracts, of additional smart contracts, so that experts building things carefully that go through security audits, they can convince the community that this would in fact enhance the robustness of the environment or enhance the richness of the economy. That can get voted in and released in a permission fashion, moving towards through additional security audits, additional, metering support, all those kinds of things, to eventually mainnet phase 3, which is permissionless. And so we, very carefully staged to allow this thing, because this is not a, oh my gosh, let's rush out a platform that people can whack together crap, right? And maybe some of it will stick. This is, building a platform that non-crypto developers can get into. And if they can build an application now in Web 2, they could go and build it in Web 3. And that requires a level of support and tooling and familiarity and training and all these things that they just take time to build. Now, what's really exciting about mainnet 1 is it turns out that what we need to launch a stable economy is what the interchain needs for the rapid growth of DeFi in the interchain. And so this is the interprotocol and our stable token for the Agoric platform. So
interprotocol, when you say that, is that the name of the token? Because I've been calling it IST.
Yes, the token is
Okay.
IST for interstable token.
Okay.
IST. And so, or iced tea, as someone on Twitter, every time I said that, he was envisioning this iced tea. So now I want a glass of iced tea and to have a rapper actor dictate our advertisement, right?
You didn't think of the drink, you thought of the rapper.
Yeah, what I can do.
Okay, but you keep saying like the other word you're using.
Interprotocol.
What do you mean by that then? Is that just like IBC? Or
no. So interprotocol is about having a stable token that works across IBC. So it is IBC native, but it is a collection of smart contracts that form the backbone of an economy, basically. So it is a MakerDAO CDP style vault infrastructure. Right? But you can take assets over IBC. So this becomes a stable token for the interchain. And that's sort of the thing that has happened with Mainnet 1 is it goes from being an initial release for this larger platform to being really critical and interesting for enabling economic growth in the interchain, right? So it is a stable token where the assets are not, one token on one zone that now you have to care about, but they are community determined set, starting, for example, with Atom, where you could bring Atom over IBC, lock it up in a vault.
To make it collateral,
make it collateral. So it becomes collateral that you then mint IST against. And then you can take that IST and you can, of course, use it on local smart contracts on the Agoric platform. But you can also take that over IBC, over to other chains. So over to Som, over to Juno, Osmosis, Evmos, etc. It can become not just a stable token that is usable in the Cosmos ecosystem, but because those chains can provide the asset that is the collateral that they're using. It's not that they buy into our chain. It's that, I've got a bunch of Atom. I can unlock its power by using it as collateral and taking IST back to Atom, Crescent, Evmos, et cetera, right?
All right. So I think, one of the reasons you're here is to definitely talk about this particular topic, but I do think we need to do a little bit of backstory into why this is very relevant today. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, or at the beginning of this episode, UST and its collapse. What I now want to touch on is basically these like three narratives that I see kind of like coming. They're very different. The UST fallout and its effect on Cosmos, the sort of movement for like applications that were trying out roll-ups and now they're creating their own app chains over on Cosmos. And I'm also learning about a lot of bridge projects or projects trying to bridge to IBC. So these are like other networks trying to bridge in. Let's kind of like rewind to May. I don't think I've talked about this at all on the show, so I'm excited to do it. I always like doing this, by the way. I always love doing recaps rather than trying to report news, because then people have digested and like they can kind of look at it a little bit more calmly. But I think the two of you were probably looking very closely at this as it happened. UST was the stablecoin on Terra. Was very, very key in Cosmos because Terra was built on the Cosmos SDK. So it was the first stablecoin to really like proliferate within the Cosmos ecosystem and then had a very dramatic collapse. That's my quick summary. But Zaki, tell me a little bit about your take. Where were you at when this happened and what did you think was going on?
So I was in Croatia for a conference.
Okay.
Fede was there. It was good. Fede from Evnos was there. And like this was going on. It had been interesting, right before that, I had literally been talking to Mike Novogratz about Terra. I had talked to Kanav about Terra. I was continuously sort of the potential risk about Terra was always well known, but what do you really do about it? You also had this problem, which we can come to later, right? Because, USDC is coming to Cosmos, all of these things. But bringing USDC, bringing the sort of dollar-backed stablecoins to Cosmos has always been a challenge because in a bridged environment, right, how do you implement the blacklists that are sort of core to the theory of compliance on these chains, right? Part of the reality was, so Terra had been on the Cosmos SDK since mid-2019. Right?
Oh, wow.
So long time Cosmos SDK user,
yeah.
right? So, both been part of the ecosystem and not part of the ecosystem. Occlusion was a validator on their network in the early years.
Occlusion is your validator company.
Yeah, Occlusion is my validator with my partners. And so like we had been part of this world. We had been like paying attention to, we were very familiar with it. We actually wrote an implementation of like the Terra price oracle, like a bunch of stuff. Like, so we were pretty engaged, like sort of into 2019 and 2020. And then as 2021 sort of rolled on, we got less and less comfortable with kind of where the Terra ecosystem was going. But on the other hand, like they had a lot of money and we were trying to get some money to like support Cosmos stuff, right?
Okay.
That was one aspect of it, right?
Okay.
Like, Doe had announced this like Project Dawn thing, right? Where he was like gonna, allocate $150 million to Cosmos projects and like Cosmos infrastructure, which was great. And we were trying to figure out like, okay, so like how do we actually get this money into things that are worthwhile? Like this was our engagement. Okay, so, keeping an eye on UST. And then the other thing that was like a big thing for Cosmos, right, is a lot of like smarter actors in the space sort of figured out that the best way to do the sort of one of the most efficient ways of doing the sort of UST carry trade, where it's like, hey, I'm going to take stablecoins, swap them to UST, get my 20% on Anchor, was to actually route through Atom, route through Osmosis, go to Terra, right? And so you actually saw this like massive volume. And the way Osmosis sort of does incentives, right, is pools that have volume get incentives.
Yeah. From the actual Osmosis treasury, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they are providing extra incentives to those large pools.
So that creates these like recursive feedback loop where like the pools get bigger because of the volume's getting bigger because of the Anchor incentives. People were like smart actors were figuring this out. So then so all of the stuff was very familiar with all of these things. And then like was basically like watching the Binance order book in real time. Well, they were Jump and LFG were like trying to keep the peg and like watch it collapse, watch it explode. But then, the thing that happened, so like Sunday and Monday were about that. Then what happened was, there's this famous like leaked Telegram group that you can see me in for a period of time and then I leave. Because basically what happened is like, I was very familiar, many other Cosmos devs were very familiar with like the mechanism by which UST gets converted into Luna. So like Luna, like the mechanism of the stablecoin is that at any time, to some limit, but the limits are fairly large, you can convert Luna to UST by burning Luna and getting UST, and you convert UST to Luna by burning UST and getting $1 worth of Luna.
Okay.
At some point, sort of Tuesday-ish.
So you're talking right around May 20th, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I don't know what the days were, but we're going like May 20th.
I just remember it as this like crazy week.
Okay.
So one of the things though about this mechanism was there was never any UI for it. You had to use the command line to do it. And so at some point, people who were on the trade realized that they could buy UST on the market, turn it into Luna, and sell it as a profit. So this put Luna into this like hyperinflationary sort of cycle where like the price of Luna kept dropping. The price of UST was kind of actually stable. And people were just like were just exiting by dumping Luna on like Binance and other markets that were forever. And it was like, okay, like what is going to happen here? So like the cost of taking over the validator set, like becoming the single validator, we would just watch it fall from like, okay, now it's like $100 million. Then like an hour later, it's like $10 million. Then an hour later, it's like $100,000. And like, you're just seeing this collapse, right? And I'm like, guys, so I start tweeting about the potential risks of all of this. Sunny is also in a chat with them. There are a bunch of other Cosmos devs. We're like, okay, validators, you have to halt the chain and then restart with staking disabled, because otherwise, like, we have no control over this like Luna UST disaster, but there are like $80 million of non-native assets on this chain.
Whoa.
Primarily like ETH and BETH and like other assets that had been brought over the wormhole bridge. And we're like, real worried about like the next phase of this after it has become essentially free to take over the chain is some sort of attack on those assets,
That's
right?
wild.
Some sort of ransom on those assets.
So I want to just give a little bit of context timing wise to what we're talking about. It looks like, I'm just checking it, it was May 2020. May 7th was when it started to depeg. That's like, I think, what is this? This is a Saturday. And so I'm guessing, Zaki, the Tuesday that we're talking about would be around the 10th. And it was that week that you were seeing this. And what you're saying is at this point, like the depegging has fully happened. It's depegging. It's like there's this automatic sort of like liquidation, or like the price of Luna is just going so low.
No, it's not automatic. Like someone has figured out, okay, that there is an ARB here, which is I can take UST, which no one will buy. I can convert it to Luna, which someone will buy.
And that's hard to do. You have to use command line to do it, I guess.
You have to
There's
use
no
command line.
interface.
But people started realizing you could do this and started buying UST to do this.
Okay.
Right?
But why wouldn't it repeg UST if they're buying it?
Well, because
it was dropping too fast.
Yeah, like there's the seller, like basically the minute any liquidity showed up, and like there wasn't infinite Luna liquidity, but like a lot of traders were looking at this coin that was worth $100 and they're like seeing it for pennies and they're like, oh, like there's an opportunity here. Like I'll buy this, not really understanding the mechanism that like infinite Luna was being printed.
The key here about being able to take over the validator set is where there might have been a billion tokens before, I don't know how many there were, now it was so cheap and the mechanic of Luna was such that you could do uncontrolled minting that someone literally minted trillions. And so now if you could take trillions and stake them, you now have a validator that is 1,000 times larger than the entire rest of the network. And so all blocks would go to it, it'll do whatever you want, and you're now in complete control from a protocol point of view.
And what could it do though? Like you just mentioned there's all these other tokens on the network itself. Could they have started to just like make those tokens land in their wallets?
Exactly. It could just, do a vote and vote to give all the money to themselves, right?
Okay.
Transfer all the money to a new wallet on another chain. Well, but they're in control of the endpoint of the bridge, so now they can give all the money to themselves and transfer it off chain. Luna implodes, but their money, as far as Ethereum is concerned, or Binance or whatever, they've been told by Luna it was transferred into the attacker's chain. What are they going to do?
Although there would have been a couple stopgaps there. I can imagine like bridge operators could have maybe done something.
Yeah, it would just have gotten like a lot worse.
Uglier.
And clearly people in that chat room decided to like arb this whole process of halting the chain also, because they somebody decided to arb the process of, oh, I realize this trade is going to stop, right? Because of this chain halt. It was all pretty chaotic.
Crazy.
It's like basically the most chaotic environment for validators that I think I've ever seen.
Wow.
But I wouldn't say that it was like a complete fail, right?
Okay. It's cool that you were in that group, though. It's kind of crazy that you had that perspective, that you were still running a validator at this point, right?
No.
Oh, you weren't? Okay, so you were just like giving your thoughts, but then you didn't have to turn anything off. But other validators actually had to turn off.
It was just like, I'm familiar with the way the code works. The TFL devs really did not know what to do.
Oh.
They're like, this thing is everything is falling apart. They didn't have a good crisis plan.
They didn't have a plan.
Crisis response was really not happening. So, a bunch of Cosmos devs showed up, advocated for a course of action that could be executed quickly. Was it perfect? No. Did it achieve the stated objectives? Were those the right stated objectives? Who knows? But the stated objectives was to create an environment in which people who have foreign assets in smart contracts would be able to extricate their assets from those smart contracts.
Okay. Did that happen?
Yeah.
I mean, the chain froze. So I guess the validator set decided to, is that what you call it? They just stopped the chain?
They stopped the chain. All the validators stopped. Yeah. Then there was an upgrade.
IBC stopped. So the relayers also stopped. Or was that after?
Yeah. So, one of the things we put in the chain in the upgrade was close the IBC channels.
Okay.
Again, who knows if this was the right solution, but it was all, under fire. Right.
Do you feel like, I got the sense that the sort of chaoticness, the intensity of this particular event, that it is like it needs to be dissected and studied in a way, because I think in it there are lessons. I mean, I think there's the obvious lesson of like how to design a stablecoin differently. That's not a good model, that's dangerous. I think people kind of already knew that was dangerous.
People already knew this was dangerous, yes.
Yeah. I mean, but then it's also this, like, to see what is a cascade from this? What is the domino effect? What happens after? I think us being able to see it will become useful for the future in design.
I think the other thing that was kind of interesting about this is the way you could construct something that basically functioned as like a waterfall credit instrument that like does not look like a legacy finance waterfall credit. Like there's a sense in which this thing was like, oh, like Luna as a chain was operating in a conceptually similar space to like a mortgage-backed security where you have like the AAA rated tranche and the junior tranche.
In 2007 or something,
yes.
Right? Okay.
And it was like, you've constructed a Cosmos chain that is the functional equivalent of that system.
Wow. When you use the word waterfall here, what do you mean? Is it like waterfall of money pouring out of itself or something?
The idea of the system was that like essentially in the risk management system, Luna was supposed to be the junior tranche where it was supposed to absorb risk. Mm-hmm. And the UST was designed to be the senior tranche. But like, if the entire system turns to garbage, like Luna fails to absorb the risk.
Mm. Could Luna have acted differently? Was there something reckless in the way that like it was promoted or how it was connected?
Oh, there are many layers of recklessness in this whole thing.
Yeah.
There's the way it was promoted by the centralized exchanges, who promoted UST as on the same level as other large, more secure dollar-backed stablecoins. There was really no quality filter there. I think it would have been wholly ineffective to fight this in Cosmos governance. Like, it would not have worked. But the other mechanism that I would say was a big thing was, TFL was reckless, right? They're withdrawing on that Saturday. You remember?
Actually, I'm going to have to recorrect it. So it was the 7th. I have a graph.
Yeah.
It was May 7th. So May 7th was a Saturday.
Yeah. So on that Saturday, they withdrew a huge amount of liquidity from the curve pool with the intention of later in the week setting up a new curve pool. And that created
they communicated that, right?
Yes.
Like this was somehow made, or was it just visible on chain? Or was it actually?
It was both.
Okay.
Yeah. It was, the setup of the new pool was planned. And the fact that they did this, in like not like one atomic operation, but like over the course of days, created a definite moment of like maximum instability where like all these other forces around instability, the general deleveraging of the space, like the general deleveraging that was going on, the like amount to which TFL had sort of burned their own Luna to create UST, swapped into other coins, for various reasons. Like all of these things like had been like sort of converging, and like that was definitely like, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Or like the Jenga block.
Do you think it was malicious? Do you think that there was someone or a big group that like saw the opportunity to crash this out?
I have heard rumors of people raising money to attack UST. So like, I don't know whether or not those rumors are true. I don't have the slightest idea. But like, again, the other thing though, that I've heard in general is that like a lot of funds had their risk management systems on UST sort of go like alert them over the weekend that they thought something was wrong, and like pull liquidity out of Banker, sell Luna, like all of this stuff. So, it could have been any number of those things, but it was certainly like the way in which the 3 pool to 4 pool set like conversion was. And so I think this is like, again, like another lesson for blockchain teams, right?
Totally.
Is that like, operating, assuming sort of a non-adversarial environment, whether or not the adversary was there or not, but operating as if no one is going to attack you at a publicly broadcast moment of vulnerability is just,
Naive.
a recipe for disaster.
There's a couple of critical things I'd like to insert here. There are lots of layers of failure or attack or vulnerability, what have you. So at the bottom, there was robust software that was functioning on a continuing basis, sending messages back and forth, all of which, were the intended action. And then there was the design of the economics that could cause this minting of trillions of Luna. That was fundamentally flawed. Now, people can talk about it as it was an experiment and what have you, but no, there was a lot of people going, it's really bad over there, but it'll never get there. And that was the fundamental bogus error on which this stack was layered. And there's an important sense in which, better that bubble was popped now before it got worse. I mean, Doe was very actively wanting to get too big to fail so that if his bubble popped, it would take everything else with him. Wow. And, and that's not the way to build a robust economy. That's not the way to build a robust system. And that was the problem at the bottom. There were plenty of other ways you get problems, but many of those could have been coped with if there wasn't this core problem that would cause the whole infrastructure to collapse because someone could take over the chain. And so, because every system is going to have, people that are, when you talked about, do you think it was deliberate or malicious? Let's be really clear. That does not mean criminal. Hostile takeovers happen legally all the time. That kind of economic activity, to notice an opportunity and take it. Arbitrageurs, malicious. I don't know. They're just doing their thing.
It's tricky.
Right? And so much of blockchain is all about being robust in the face of this Byzantine environment. That's just a Byzantine economic environment. Suck it up.
Yeah. What about you, on the Agoric front? You're busy building. Did you feel this? Did it hit you? Did your team feel it? Or were you just guys oh, well, we're not really, we're not IBC enabled yet. It doesn't matter.
Well, okay. So several things, and some of this will go back to Cosmoverse in November or whenever it was, where we started talking about interprotocol, or at that point it was called Run, and talking about we've gotten through mainnet. We launched our mainnet 0 and then went to Cosmoverse and talked about it, right? Many of our investors are people in the Cosmos ecosystem, so they suddenly could actually get their tokens and start to stake them. Even though rewards weren't turned on, now you can start to see that there could be governance. There could be all these things that they're used to. But when we describe interprotocol, folks like, Zaki, Sunny, Pung, people from, Fede, from all these different chains, Sunny was like, finally, an atom-backed stable token. That's just what we've needed forever. And I really had this sense related to UST. People were using UST heavily in the Cosmos ecosystem because it was kind of the only game in town. Yep. And everyone was leery about it, partly because its architecture was to use this, you're relying on that chain over there that has some potential issues. And not only are you relying on that chain, you must buy into their token, right? Yeah. You have to buy into so the only way to exit is through Luna. That means, if you got really active use of it on Gaia, you got to go over to Luna to exit. And so there's sort of a relying on some other project to have yours be successful. That can always be challenging. And so they were very excited about being able to unlock the capital in all of their chains, in Osmo and in Gaia, Cosmos Hub, and et cetera. And the fact that, sort of attitude-wise, we were much more about IBC enabling the world and inclusiveness so that they could feel economically that they were engaged in the stable token. And so this changed our vision of what was, our initial launching to being something that was suddenly a huge service to the entire ecosystem. And that's part of what inspired renaming it. And the interprotocol and the stable token was sort of important, but not central. We need a stable token in Agoric. The particular mechanics don't matter to us, but it needs to be robust. It needs to be healthy. It needs to be economically sound and solvent. And so we've been working on that.
Got it.
So obviously we saw this happening because we'd been paying attention to stable tokens in the Cosmos ecosystem because we were planning to roll out with a new, very robust one. And it was, interesting. Couldn't keep your eyes off of what was going on, partly because, oh my gosh, is it going to get all the way to where it hits that death spiral that's sort of inherent in the architecture? And we had a conference the very next week. So Gateway Events, one of our investors, Rockaway, put it on, and it turned into a big Cosmos conference. We were one of the sponsors.
This was in Prague.
It was in Prague, and it was inspired originally by Cosmoverse. That worked. Let's get a bunch of people together in the community and make something happen. And that was starting right after that Tuesday that you talked about earlier, right? So starting on the 15th. So we're showing up there, me, Zaki, the Agoric crew, all of these Cosmos chains. And at the start of the conference, everyone's like, what's going to happen? It's really scary. I mean, there was really this, I don't know what to do yet, right? And there was a lot of Terra people there and all this sort of thing. And a big impact, I think, of that conference and we'll look back historically and sort of measure some of that, is, it started with, okay, we had a plan, but let's talk about UST because, oh my God, right? And so many chains stepped up. I mean, the first thing was, what happens to the Cosmoverse? So, first off, IBC executed beautifully, Tendermint executed beautifully. All these things were happening, but it wasn't a bug in the software. It wasn't these systems collapsing. It was everything functioning just amazingly well to accomplish this thing that had an economic problem. But that thing imploding over there, prices fell, but everything kind of stayed up and was fine. I mean, this is an important way in which loosely coupled systems working together, they'll take some dependency, but they get to control it, they get to bound it, and they get to stay up when that other thing over there dies. And so it was just a tour de force.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I spoke to the Wormhole folks. I mean, this is maybe a bit more of a centralized bridge, but like all of their system also worked. That was one of their takeaways. Exactly. Nothing crashed, nothing broke, even though there was like liquidity flowing super fast over that.
And then the other thing that happened is the developer ecosystem worked. So just one more point about that is at this conference, everyone's like, there were also a bunch of good projects on Terra, that were quality things that they built there because, there was a stable token there first. That's critical to making an economy happen, as I've mentioned multiple times. And so the community of Cosmos was just incredibly welcoming, right? There's several Cosm-Wasm chains that are all like, you guys have expertise in projects, here's a new place to build, we'll fund it, get over here, and so the transition of attitude across the 2 days of the conference from, oh my God, what's happening, to, wow, Cosmos is healthy and thriving and growing. There's a place for these people. Yep, there's going to be a big market downturn, but this is a robust place to build. Was huge.
I want to move on to sort of a second narrative I had sort of mentioned here, which was like dApps that have been thinking of deploying on rollups, potentially launching their own chain. I think the biggest example here is DYDX, moving from Starknet to the Cosmos ecosystem. But I do know that there's some like talk of other chains doing, or other applications doing this. I am curious, like it almost feels like a narrative that like the UST narrative, as much as it showed sort of like that the network stayed up, it was also, I think we could say it was a bit of a hit because it was like a somewhat toxic asset that had like spilled into the Cosmos ecosystem. It pulled down a lot of prices. It made people sort of like feel slightly shaky. Then this new kind of narrative of like roll-ups potentially not being the place where people want to build, but rather them moving to the Cosmos ecosystem is an interesting narrative, I would say. And I just wondered, is that a blip narrative or is that something you're seeing like in a bigger way?
So there's a lot of conversations about this going on. So I want to link it two things to this. One is applications that were on Terra have gone in a bunch of different directions, right? Okay. Some of them have gone to, Polygon and Solana and all of this stuff. But there's been quite a few applications that have stayed at Cosmos. Some of them have gone to Juno, but some of them have also launched their own chains. Some of those chains are already live.
Oh, crazy.
And the other thing that was kind of funny about all of this is Terra was always this like both part of Cosmos and not part of Cosmos, right? They were always kind of like, oh, we're our own thing separate from the rest of the Cosmos ecosystem with like loose connections to the Cosmos ecosystem.
Wasn't there some sort of like schism with Kepler Wallet in them too? Like I feel like they weren't added for a long time or something like that. Or ever?
The Kepler team have not been fans.
Okay.
It's sort of been an interesting thing though, as close as the Kepler and Osmosis teams are, the Kepler team was not fans of Terra and UST. And, even though it became such an important asset for a while on Osmosis. Okay, so a lot of these have come. Some of them have launched their own chains. Kujira just launched like within, this is early July, and the Kujira just launched their mainnet which is like a DEX and stuff like that, a lot of things that were sort of in the Terra ecosystem have been very seamlessly able to move into the Cosmos ecosystem. You know, Delphi Digital has their Mars project, which is now going to be another chain on Cosmos. Like all of these things, right? Huge amount. And like the world of, hey, like we mostly talk to TFL people, we mostly talk to people on the Terra side, has now transformed into a world of we talk to Jack, we talk to Zaki, we talk to David at Galileo, we talk to like this whole network of people, right?
Yeah. Do you think what we're also going to see, though, is like some projects just shouldn't have their own chain? Like, do you think that might swing too far into like everyone has a dApp chain or like has an app chain? Is it an app chain or dApp chain, or is it a
app chain?
It's not a zone anymore. I was schooled recently for calling it a zone. They were like, "What are you saying?"
We were really worried about Blockstream's trademark on sidechains for whatever reason when we wrote the white paper. That was why we did it this way.
So it's app chain.
Yeah, whatever.
Not zone.
I don't know. I honestly, I don't really care.
Okay. All right. But go back to the question. Do you think we might swing too far with too many teams?
So I think that's a good routing now into your roll-up question, right? Are all of these chains going to be able to economically secure themselves, support a lot of economic activity, all of the stuff?
A full validator set, et cetera.
Yeah,
et cetera.
And what I would say is one of the biggest differences between the Cosmos ecosystem and the roll-up ecosystem, specifically the execution layers of the roll-up ecosystem, is right now the execution layers are not really community projects. There is a company. The company has a business model, like frequently source available business source license stuff. You can't just like fork the code. And, all of these entities have roadmaps, right? They all have these like elaborate roadmaps of stuff that they're working on. And you have an entity like DYDX who's like, we do not want to couple our decentralization to our vendor's decentralization roadmap, right? And we would like to be able to throw our own engineering resources to solve our decentralization problem. And the roll-up ecosystem today, there's nothing that architecturally about roll-ups that forever makes this true. It just means that the roll-up ecosystem today did not have anything to offer them. And so that is how, DYDX sort of ended up on Cosmos.
Could you imagine where like a lot of these groups launch app chains, aren't able to fully create secure validator? Like they just don't get enough value into their validator. So they can't grow the value high enough that it's not corruptible, basically, or they can't get enough validators or something. Would they then potentially become like a roll up on Celestia? Is that an option?
That is like largely a world there is a lot of work going on into, again, because the execution environments are so immature. Going back from like 2019 when Celestia was founded to now as we get close to Celestia launching, the thing that is most surprising to me is how immature the execution environments still are compared to the Cosmos SDK. And in theory, I'm not as familiar, but compared to something like Substrate.
Wait, you're saying CosmWasm? Is that what you mean?
No, what I mean is the Cosmos SDK itself. Like what DYDX wanted is like a full distributed system, right? They wanted, proposer selection. They wanted fairness. They wanted to be able to implement their own business logic on top of a roll-up system. And no one offers that today. No one in the roll-up ecosystem really offers a solution in that space. And one of the things that we're seeing is like a surprisingly large amount of interest and using pieces of the Cosmos SDK on top of Optimint to build roll-ups on top of Celestia for custom chains because there isn't an execution layer toolkit that really works for them.
Do you think, could they also use something like interchain security eventually, or is it too hard to do that kind of migration? So interchain security being like using potentially a validator set and creating almost like a subset of those validators that could be used for other projects.
So interchain security is going to appear in multiple forms, just like everything in Cosmos, right? We make open source technology, we give it to the world, multiple go-to-markets run simultaneously. So one of the go-to-markets for interchain security is like expanding the Atom economic zone, right? And that's not really like, hey, I have an app chain, I would like someone else to run it, I'm worried about security. Like for that specific go-to-market, like our focus is expand the Atom economic zone.
Okay.
But like you have teams like Saga, which are trying to sort of make it as easy, like make it much, much easier to like sort of deploy app chains, get it secured by validators, all of the stuff, while without having to go through all of this. And that might end up being a very appropriate solution for that kind of environment.
Okay, I want to talk about the third narrative because then we got to get back to IST. The third narrative is bridges bridging to IBC or just generally other projects looking to bridge into IBC. You had sort of mentioned USDC as well, using Axelar. But yeah, tell me a little bit about, I mean, Axelar is a Cosmos app chain itself, so maybe that's a bad example. But like I know that there's, you know, a lot of the bridge teams we've talked to, I've had on the show, I'll sometimes ask them about IBC, and there is often some narrative, some kind of like exploration happening there. So is that a narrative that you think is taking hold of Cosmos too, which is like other networks trying to bridge into it?
So two of the most amazing teams that we've sort of found in the last, 6 months or so. One is the composable finance team, has just like been crushing IBC to the Substrate Polkadot ecosystem, and then also been doing it for the Near ecosystem. The other teams are Polymer, and they're looking at other ecosystems to build IBC clients too, roll-ups, et cetera, right?
Interesting.
It is worth distinguishing getting IBC connected to those other chains, because IBC is designed to be largely technology stack neutral. It's designed to be able to do IBC over to Substrate or even over to proof of work chains. It's designed so that developers can accommodate that. They can adopt it as this neutral mechanism. And that allows you to have the, robustness and usability and extensibility of IBC all the way through to those other chains. That's very different from IBC to a node that is then doing a bridge where there's some, multi-sig 5-party bridge to just transfer assets. And so it's useful to distinguish those two cases.
But I mean, every time you touch Ethereum, you are doing that. Like every time you have to convert IBC to something else because they wouldn't have an IBC.
But for example, the Substrate bridge is IBC to Substrate nodes so that you are doing end-to-end security without trusting the relayers in the middle, which is one of the much more robust elements of IBC, versus bridges where you're trusting the software in the middle to faithfully move your money back and forth.
Yeah. On the Polkadot front, they also have the XCM, and I was wondering if the XCM and IBC will ever speak the same language or somehow talk to each other, but we'll see. Maybe they're too different.
That is a composable finance question. But I think it's the most exciting thing about all of this stuff is, again, we are disseminating out the IBC expertise to a point where other teams are able to implement it.
Very cool. In other places. In other places.
I was always kind of frustrated, to be honest, with the ICF team's like unwillingness to like really go after some of these other environments as like places. It's fantastic that we have new participants in the ecosystem that are doing this work.
That. Cool. Okay, I think we've covered some like good background narratives of the Cosmos ecosystem, which I think does bring us now to talk a little bit about IST. I guess in that conversation, maybe we can talk a little bit about how it could compete. I mean, I think, Dean, you've already mentioned a little bit like where it comes from. You always had the plan for a stablecoin, but now it's sort of become, I mean, at least it sounds like you're thinking about it a little bit more like taking the role of what UST was doing, but obviously built on much, much sturdier foundations. I hope.
Yep.
It better. But what about like USDC coming in? Like, do you see it? Is that a competition? There is a stablecoin coming in. It's bridged in. It's not IBC native. I don't think, right?
Correct.
There's no like USDC
well, even
being
if there
minted
is, it's still,
in Cosmos.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's coming.
That's coming?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, even at that point, it's in some sense not IBC native because your money's in a bank account. But yeah, native direct bridging into Cosmos is coming.
Oh, where is that going to live,
issuance
actually?
from to be announced.
Okay.
I mean, the main story is, like DYDX has like been tweeting, and they represent like $1 billion of USDC TVL, right? We've been working very closely with the DYDX team to find a USDC solution that is acceptable to them and acceptable to the broader Cosmos DeFi ecosystem.
Like, so that will then be a native asset as well in Cosmos, mintable. Like some centralized body will be minting it.
I think there's a fundamental reason, even in an environment like the Ethereum ecosystem is economically stable in a world where both multi-collateral DAI exists and USDC exists and Tether exists, right? Like economic stability of these things is like real and actual and tangible. And they are actually complementary to each other.
Right.
And you think different ones have different use cases? Like, is there different use? Like, are there moments where you should be using DAI and moments where you should be using USDC?
Well, like, let's say you have a lot of Atom, right? You're like, I have a lot of Atom. I would like to take out a loan against that Atom. Sure, you could go to some lending protocol. You know, lending protocols always have this mismatch between depositors and borrowers, where like if you deposit when there's no borrowers, you're just, you know, not earning anything. And if you are trying to borrow when there's no depositors, and so like lending protocols are constantly trying to smooth this. This is literally what we're doing in Sommelier, is building a smoother for this, is something that smooths this. But when you have a maker style protocol, you can show up with your atoms and get your stablecoins. There does not have to be a depositor.
Right.
Got it. Okay, so IST, like, is IST that, I mean, you've sort of said it, it's a multi-collateral DAI of Cosmos, I guess you could say. But is it multi-collateral? Is it starting multi-collateral? Like when you first envisioned this, Dean, wasn't it more like a single collateral?
No,
it was always multi-collateral.
Yeah, it was always about bring assets over IBC to be able to mint against it. Because
I see.
Ironically, the one asset that we don't directly do this sort of CDP style vault with is Agoric's build, because then that competes with using build to secure the chain, right? And so it was always about being able to bring other assets as collateral and enabling people across the interchain to unlock the value of those assets. And so the multi-collateral was, well, got to do Atom, right? And you know, Osmo, got to do Osmo, right? Got, you know, now, oh, well, there's all these other chains coming up, many of which are going to be, you know, big chains with serious asset value there, enabling them to unlock that in a way that is consistent with how all the other chains are unlocking themselves, right? What you would not want is a stable coin per chain, right? A stable coin per app chain. What you want is to know you can use the same thing. I can unlock my Atom and use it over in this smart contract running on Evmos. I can unlock my Osmo and use that value over in the same smart contract running on Evmos, right?
Would you only allow Cosmos native tokens to be collateral, or would you allow like synthetic ETH to be a collateral as well?
Well, so first off, it's a community thing. It's really not up to me. There'll be an economic committee that, you know, informed by Gauntlet running simulations and all this sort of thing that determines the right profiles and risk for that. But one of the key differentiators about the implementation of IST on Agoric is because it is built with the same hardened JavaScript framework with composable smart contracts, it will be much more straightforward for it to grow over time to incorporate other things like even synthetic assets for off-chain assets, you know, or at the point where there's some robust set of NFTs or some robust set of securitized, you know, real estate assets, the community could decide with the appropriate risk models and liquidation process to add those as potential collateral types. That's a long way away. The key thing is it was always, you know, the assets are up to the community. And if there was a robust bridge, then being able to use, you know, Sol or Wrapped ETH or BTC, those were always, you know, in something that we envisioned as being reasonable collateral. It was always designed, IST was always designed, Interprotocol was always designed to be multi-collateral with assets in the Cosmos ecosystem so that you could uniformly use a stable token even if you were starting from having Osmo or having Atom, and assets from other chains, either as IBC connects to Substrate or what have you, or as they're just brought over with bridges. So, you know, Wrapped ETH, Wrapped BTC, ZEC, Solana, what have you, all of those are capital assets that have some kind of history, you know, models of volatility, such you can come up with an appropriate role for them as collateral in our ecosystem. And, you know, and that's how you power an economy, is by connecting disparate things and making it so you can do business across them.
So now I want to throw back to the story a little bit of UST. And I guess a question I have is, given the knowledge that we have from that kind of case happening, from having been able to observe it, like, do you have protection within the design itself for if a toxic asset were to be used as collateral in a system like that? And I guess here I need to also check, like, could a toxic asset really kind of mess it up? I'm assuming yes.
So, well, we have protections against that. So the key thing, I mean, one of the biggest protections is debt limits for any particular asset type. And if you're going to have a system that's extensible, thinking about how you extend it but bound the risk of any new extension is absolutely critical. So we were talking about USDC, that's a friend to getting DeFi going, right? We have a module which you can bring in USDC and directly mint IST against that because it's a high quality existing stable token. But that too has a debt limit because that's another system. It's got its own risks. There's whether it's contract, bridge, or U.S. government, and so it's got to have a debt limit. So every distinct collateral has a debt limit, and one of the jobs of the Economic Committee is if things start to turn south, bring that debt limit to zero so that no new vaults can be created or no new IST can be minted against a collateral that looks like it's at risk, right?
Yeah. Would there be like a risk assessment done on these different assets? Is that how that happens?
Exactly.
Is that how it happens in DAI, actually?
Yeah, there's a risk committee that evaluates new collateral types. There's a whole process for adding a collateral type. In our case, we're working through that process now.
The work of the risk committee at Maker is actually like a shining example of prudence in DeFi, right?
Yeah. It's an inspiration.
Monet Supply, who's like one of the people on the Risk DAO, is also a big Cosmos enthusiast. And so, we talk about this all the time, but I'm a huge fan of his work. Like, they look at smart contracts, they look at the economics of the asset, they look at everything, right? And, I hope that with Inter, we live up to the standard that is set by the MakerDAO Collateral Risk Committee.
So we're inspired by their risk committee. In addition, we've engaged Gauntlet. They do economic simulations on other smart contracts and are very well respected, Tarun Chitra and company, about how they understand these things.
Sometimes co-host of the show.
Yeah. You might have met him, right?
You might have heard him. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Gauntlet will be doing ongoing simulations. So not only we do risk evaluations up front, but every week there's a reevaluation of every collateral type to figure out what the right debt limits, interest rates, volatility targets, all these kinds of things are for each collateral type independently in each of the different ways it might function in our system. And so that will, as we grow either new collateral types, or new collaterals, or even new collateral types, like if we want to use liquidity tokens as a collateral type, that has some important economic advantages from a capital efficiency point of view. That's something that we look forward to doing after, in future mainnet releases. And that's something that they'll be able to model, incorporate into the overall, risk analysis models that's being continuously evaluated for each of these collaterals.
Very cool. I want to say a big thank you to both of you for coming on the show, sharing with us a little backstory on UST, also what you've both been up to in your respective projects, and the IST/interstable token /inter/IST, whatever we're going to call it, upcoming token. I guess this comes out with mainnet 1, phase 1, right? The one you were saying would happen potentially in Q3. So it's something to look for, I guess. Cool.
And we'll be back after that launches.
Yeah, sure. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for having us. And as always, it's great.
Thank you, Anna.
I want to say a big thank you to the team that put together the ZK podcast. That's Tanya, Rachel, Chris, and Henrik. And to our listeners, thanks for listening.